Hi there, welcome back in the new series of CSS. From today onwards, I'm going to upload a new videos for the CSS so that our students can find fruitful in order to learn the CSS from the zero or from the ground basis to the advanced level. This tutorial is basically made for those who are new in the CSS. That might be in it might be in a school level, or it might be in a college level, or it might be in an advanced level, whoever are working in the professional level now. So the main concept of making this video is simply to help my students so that they can continue their journey in the world of web development. So if you are working as a web development, if you are working as a web programmer, so there are certain things that you need to understand first. Of course, in order to write all this kind of coding, you need to have one common platform. That means you need to have some sort of editor where you all are going to write the program. If you remember, when you were learning HTML in school life, you might have been using the most commonly used text editor, that was the Notepad. Now here for the CSS, of course, we are going to use Sublime Text Editor, or if you are interested, you might be using the Dreamweaver as well. It is up to you. Now there are certain prerequisites I do understand in order to work, or in order to understand clearly how the codes are going to work in CSS in order to develop any kind of websites. Of course, the basic starts from the HTML only. So I hope this journey is going to be quite exciting, and from today we are going to add one more topic over here in our channel, that's a CSS, and definitely I do believe it's going to help you to understand. Now, before we begin with the other, the coding and all, first I would like to tell you that why we need to learn this CSS. If you remember, whenever you were in school life, you were learning most commonly used, the text editor, that was a Notepad, and you were using web programming, that was the HTML. Now, have you ever thought that after HTML, why we started talking about the CSS? Why JavaScript? There are many reasons actually. So if I have to tell you in the easiest way, HTML is simply used to give you the layout. That means these are the language that is used to display your content over the web. But the second requirement comes over here. How about designing the page? It's not like that you simply code, you give the coding and your website is designed. No, HTML simple alone cannot design any website actually. So we need to make this page look interactive, dynamic looking has to be there. So if you want to design your HTML or your web page in order to make it more interactive, where the designings are done properly, in order to make your page look more interactive, you'll have to have a knowledge of the CSS. So that's why CSS is mandatory actually. Apart from that, now the layout is done, designing is done. How about making your page more interactive? For example, Facebook, Twitter and all. Okay, now in that case, you need to have some extra knowledge of your JavaScript. Of course, I'm going to upload a video for the CSS and JavaScript both. But first, now we are going to start with the CSS that will help you to design your web page, to design your page in a such a way that it looks interactive. Now, let's jump ahead first to the theoretical portion of your CSS, then we'll move to the practical session. Now, after having the brief introduction of myself and the topic that we're going to start, now let's jump ahead that how CSS can be used, or what is the need in order to continue your journey for the CSS for becoming a good web developer or the designer over here. Now, whenever any programmer, okay, web designer, web developer, they start coding, the first thing that what they need to understand over here is that the coding that's been done by HTML is not all in all. Why? It is simply used to make a layout actually. Now, after you get a frame, that frame has to be designed properly. So that means after the structural work is done for the web designing, in order to make it look more interactive, okay, more dynamic, the first work is structural. That means that is being done by the HTML. But after that, if you'd like to focus on the presentation, that means if you want to make that page more presentable, okay, with the help of certain designing, in that case you'll have to have a good knowledge of the CSS. So after that, as we have already discussed, that if you'd like to make your website more dynamic, you'll have to use the JavaScript. That is for the behavioral actually. That means over here now, our prime concern in this tutorial is focused in the center one, that's a CSS. So what is CSS? It stands for Cascading Style Sheet actually. So what is the main purpose? What is the use of this CSS? Simply, as I discussed, it is simply used to actually control the style of a web document actually. Obviously, whatever contents you are going to display over the cloud, over the web, it's going to be in a form of your document only. So that's why if you would like to have a complete control Okay, in order to make it more presentable over the cloud, you'll have to use the CSS. Now that means the entire style or the entire layout of your multiple web pages or the websites over the cloud is being controlled by the CSS. Okay, now the next question comes over here. Who started using this CSS? Who made this? Who created this? Of course, the CSS is actually created and maintained through a group of people. It's not done by a single. It's not done by a sole person. That means it's done by the group actually. Okay, that is within W3C. I do believe that you know the meaning of this. Okay, that is known as a CSS working group. Now, in order to start coding for your CSS, you need to understand another thing clearly. What are the different points? What are the different layers that we're passing through actually in order to become a web developer or designer? Now, first we started with the HTML. So that simply creates the structure actually. That's a layout. It provides the structure, it provides the layout of the web page design. Okay, that's a fundamental building block of any web page. After that, when we talk about the using of CSS, it is simply used to apply, okay, your element in such a way that this page becomes responsive. It looks more professional, it looks more easy for the client to understand, it is kind of dynamic. Now after that, the last web programming language that we are having over here is the JavaScript. So this JavaScript is completely meant to make your page the final touching. That's a dynamic web page is actually done by the JavaScript. So increase interactivity, adds interactivity to a web page. It might be in a form of your forms that you fill over the cloud. Have you ever thought to yourself that when we fill any kind of form, okay, the survey is done, where do you think all these things are going? How do you collect all the data from here? Actually, these are being easily managed by the JavaScript. So it handles the complex functions and the features. That means if you'd like to implement your web page with the complex functions and the features, that is not possible with the CSS, neither by the HTML. So for that, we'll have to depend on JavaScript only. Okay, and the this programmatic code that we use over here is completely used to enhance the functionality of your web page. So that's why in order to become a web developer, good web developer, good web designer, or let's say good web programmer, you need to have a knowledge of all of these three. So now we are going to talk about the CSS. So now this was the introduction for the CSS, okay, and the difference between HTML and your JavaScript and CSS. Now in the next video, we are going to start the practical implementation of all the CSS code along with the theory. So if you find it fruitful, please do like and subscribe. Thank you.